Omer, but thankfully it got tipped off, and I fixed it, and I was heard. So that was good, which means you were heard. So I'm here live from I guess this is our den in University City, and this is From the Left Wing. Let me get there for a second. There we go. From the Left Wing, episode 7, believe it or not. Yeah, kind of hard to believe, but it is episode 7, where I've been reading columns, individual columns from The Column that I was honored to write 10 years ago for a couple of years for the Jewish Federation's website. The column is called From the Left Wing, and as I've been repeating because it feels like I should, that the left wing in this instance that I'm referring to is on the religious spectrum, on the spiritual spectrum from left to right, from most liberal to most conservative on the right, most liberal on the left. So not talking specifically about politics. I suppose, like any spectrum, you could be on the left on one of those spectrums and on the right on the other, and vice versa. So I want to be really clear about this. And so I wrote this column really wanting to put myself as close to the left end of that religious, Jewish, spiritual spectrum, because that's where I feel like I belong. So I'm going to, before I kind of introduce today's reading of the column, I'm going to once again sort of try to encapsulate what I'm talking about when it comes to left and right, just to kind of, so we're clear. Before I do that, I just want to say it's good to be here and connected with you. Whoever's out there watching live and whoever watches this on the video, I'm sending you my blessings and my concern and my love in this challenging time that we are going through, and I hope that you're staying well, and those that you love are staying well, and I'm glad that we're all together. If we can't be together physically, which I hope we can soon or eventually, I'm glad we have these tools to connect us and to allow us to hear each other's voices and see each other's punums, that delightful Yiddish word for face, punum. So left and right, religiously speaking, Jewishly speaking. I want to say that when it comes to the spectrum on the left, when it comes to Jewish traditions, religious traditions, also customs, laws, on the left, folks that are on the left end of the spectrum or towards the left end tend to be more flexible, or as flexible as possible when it comes to those traditions, to adapt them, to change them, to discard some of them. And those on the right, as you go more towards the right, are more inflexible and as more to want to stick to tradition, even ancient tradition, as much as possible. On the left, that flexibility includes adaptation to the modern age or the contemporary age. Not necessarily adaptation because of convenience, but maybe adaptation because of new knowledge or changing norms or values, right? So instead of stepping out of religion entirely, which everyone is free to do and be secular in this country, thankfully that we have that freedom, those on the left would want to stay religious, in this case stay Jewish, but work on being flexible so that their religious lives are still consistent and have integrity with the other parts of their lives. So that was long. Similarly, on the left, there is an openness to change, which I've kind of covered, and on the right, there's more objections to change. And again, of course, it's a spectrum, so it depends where you put yourself or your community. There's the left and the right ends or wings, and then there's in between, and that's where most of us live. On the left, when it comes to relating with those from people from other traditions and other religions and other faiths or no faith, which is a little bit about the topic of today's column. On the left, there's a great openness to dialogue and programs with adherents from other traditions and other spiritual, religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. And as you go more towards the left end, there's an openness even to the idea that other traditions, other religions contain teachings and spiritual practices of value that maybe can be what we call made kosher or adapted into our own spiritual lives, or even coexist with our Judaism, aspects of other spiritualities. On the right, there's a much more guarded sort of feeling about dialogue and programs with adherents of other traditions and faiths. They happen towards the right, but they're fewer and far between, and I think there's more hesitation to do those. And probably when you get to the very, very right end, there's probably none at all, or very little, if any. And going along that, certainly much more closed to the idea that teachings and spiritual practices from other religions or traditions may have value, and the idea of adopting them into a Jewish life, is certainly considered not kosher, or even anathema as you get towards the right. It's always welcome, by the way, if someone on the right end, I try really hard to be. Obviously, I know what I know, and I feel secure in where I am. I read a lot, and I know people on the right end of the religious spectrum. But if there's anyone out there that wants to disagree with the way I've characterized this, I'm happy to discuss. When it comes to inclusion of others into our religious communities, or even into our religion, on the left, there tends to be a broad and inclusive definition of how someone identifies, perhaps from outside the community, or who can identify from outside the community and participate, and then ultimately, if they want, convert. On the right, conversion happens in Judaism. Conversion is part of all Jewish life. You are either born Jewish or you can convert, but towards the right end, there's a much more rigidity around who can participate and who can convert, and an exclusivity as opposed to an inclusivity, again, as you get further onto the right. So those are some thoughts about the left and right spectrum. I had said last broadcast, which was Tuesday, that I was going to read about schools. I had written a column about really a personal column about my experience as a parent and my kids' experience in the schooling that we chose for them. I kind of started to get a little bit, I kind of thought maybe I'd wait on that. And I still have a number of columns to read, and for some reason I just was feeling maybe a little vulnerable about reading that particular column for reasons that I'll go into some of them. And I was going to switch it up. But as you can see, back to school, I did keep it. And I'll show you really what really tipped me off. And I posted this just recently on CRC's Facebook page. So just an hour ago, there was a parade, one of those, nouveau quarantine parades that are really wonderful. People celebrate birthdays by going in cars, and they do a drive-by. I think many of you have probably seen these, and they drive by, and they have signs, and they send love from I guess a physically distant way, and they're really actually very touching. I think we'd all rather have in-person gatherings and parties, but while we can't, this was what a creative way to be flexible. So anyways, we have a neighbor, a family who we've been friends with. They've been here almost as long as we have. We've been here a little longer than they have, but we're talking 15 to 20 years. And there's one of their daughters who is graduating high school, attends University City High School, and she's the valedictorian, our neighbor and our friend. And as you can see, and there's the line of cars down there, which really stretched blocks, and then some of the individual cars with the signs, and they were honking, people through the sunroof there. So anyways, I'm going to go back to this here. I don't know. I said, you know what? I got to talk about the schools, because what I wrote about back then was the University City schools. And so it kind of felt like a sign that I should forge ahead. So I think I mentioned on Tuesday that this column got quite a lot of response. I remember I was walking in Forest Park, and 2 separate people stopped me to talk to me about this column. So, I guess I have to say that usually I do some of my caveats after the reading. I'm gonna give one before, because I talk about my kids and how we sent them to the University City Public Schools, which we did, both elementary school and middle school. But since the column was written, both of my kids, my awesome kids, attended other high schools, even though we stayed at University City, so independent, private high schools, 2 different high schools, by the way, while many of their good friends stayed at University City, and in my daughter's case, graduated 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, and in my son's case, are graduating this spring, and he is graduating as well from his high school. And so I just needed to really be open about that although at the time I wrote this column, we weren't even thinking along those lines. Both of my kids took kind of really different paths, and chose we had the privilege and the luxury to be able to send them to schools that really fit their unique selves. They both, like I said, stayed friends with their University City public school friends, and I think gained a lot from that experience. But as I read the column, I just want people to keep in mind that that neither graduated from the school district that I'm talking about, and that's important. So that's my caveat. I call it Back to School, and I was thinking when I wanted to read this one that it's kind of the end of school, the end of the school year. We had a wonderful Zoom Hebrew school service yesterday for our Hebrew school, and we sang and we gave them blessings, and obviously it would have been wonderful to have been together, and it did obviously punctuate the notion that we weren't together, because there we were on the computer screen. But it was lovely, and I know that schools, in some ways better, in some ways worse, have adapted. In some schools better, and some schools are not doing it as well, unfortunately. Have tried to adapt to this new situation, and the last month or 2 of schools, pretty universally, have not been at school. But now we're getting into May, and even if we were at schools, or if our kids were at schools, they would be kind of winding down. So I guess I was thinking in the spirit of school and the end of school, but also this notion of back to school. Hopefully, we are going back to school in the fall, we being our kids, both all the levels of school, including college. Who knows? And everything is very up in the air right now. But for now, I'm hoping we can hope that that we figure out how to navigate the virus and continue to save lives and flatten the curve and go back to school. I think that would be very healthy for everybody. So I'm going to read the column now. And I call it Back to School. And actually it was written on a September. You'll hear that in just a second. And so clearly it's not September, it's May. And this is 10 years ago. But I still stand by. I really did read each one of these columns before I decided to do this broadcast, and I stand by these columns. So, back to school. It's September and school is in full swing. I've been wanting for some time to write about my family's experience at the public schools of University City, but I do so now with some trepidation. It is important to me that in writing passionately on this topic, I don't come off as being judgmental. This is, above all, a personal story. I have friends and colleagues who send their children to private schools and public ones, to religious day schools, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian, to schools in the neighborhood, and to schools that are far away. Raising children is so important and holy, but there is far more than one way to do the right thing when it comes to school. With that sincere caveat complete, I want to say that I have a son in the upper grades of an elementary school in University City and a daughter who just started the middle school in the same district. Both of them are minorities as white children, and the number of Jewish students is quite small. And I can't imagine we would trade our present situation for any scenario under the sun. My wife and I moved to St. Louis 12 years ago from Greenwich Village in New York. We chose University City because it seemed to be quite urban for a suburb. We loved the diversity, we could walk to the exciting Loop District, and even ride our bicycles to the zoo and the planetarium in Forest Park. A family with a toddler, we hardly gave school a thought. But as the years rolled by, it was hard to ignore some of the negative talk about the district, the school district, and even harder to ignore the people we got to know who moved away or explored private options as their children grew older. Though both of us believed in multiculturalism and racial justice, people tend to seek out for their children circumstances that worked well for them growing up, and neither my wife nor I attended schools that in any way could be called diverse. My wife attended Jewish day school in Boston until switching to a suburban high school, and I went to the mostly white and well-off public schools of Chicago's North Shore, where we had no classes on the Jewish high holidays. That's how much of a significant Jewish population there were in my public schools. Even so, we stayed put in our neighborhood and walked together to that first day of public school kindergarten 8 years ago. I guess now 18 years ago. We did have role models. Our synagogue contains a healthy number of households who had recently sent their children all the way through the University City school system, and some who were still on the journey. I will never forget those first few times watching the kids on the playground before the first bell. It was like a living scene out of Martin Luther King's dream where, as Dr. King said, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers. I suddenly realized how rarely these pictures actually exist in reality. At the same time, the schools are underperforming, and they have few bells and whistles. In this way, they are much more similar to the city system than other suburban districts. The issue is mainly about socioeconomics, but unfortunately that is tied together with race as well in University City. While there are certainly affluent African American families in the district and struggling white ones, poverty is far more prevalent among the families of color. Some have only recently moved out of the inner city or the city, and many are still clinging to the edge of middle class existence. The many problems endemic to that life sometimes means that education, sometimes over generations, takes a back seat in these families, despite how deeply they care about their children. To compound all that, even in public schools, where a significant number of families that attend are under-resourced, the school must do with less as well than other better resourced districts. However, my kids are thriving academically with awesome teachers and individualized attention. I also know that it makes a positive difference to the school and the children who start out their school lives less prepared than my kids and others whose families have had the luxury of giving them a great educational head start, that we're all part of the mix. Moreover, my children are exposed to the situations and struggles of classmates, friends who we have had to pick up for our birthday parties, for example, because there's no car in the family. That would have given them a sense of humility and a fuller understanding of the world that would have been hard to achieve in a more homogeneous atmosphere. I say we are lucky to have one another, and that goes for the parents in the community as well. Jewishly, there have been blessings as well, many blessings. There is an open and eager sharing of the various cultural and religious lifestyles of the teachers and students at the school. My children love sharing the meaning of the matzah, as well as the matzah crackers themselves. They bring in their lunch every Passover. I have an entire class of kids visit our sukkah at our house every year. One day I came to school and a mom I had become friendly with approached me, sobbing. In her hands was that day's St. Louis American, which is our St. Louis local newspaper that serves the African American community. There had been an important event, and the article contained a picture of me. The mom had taken a magic marker and drawn a circle around my face. The only white person in the room. "Thank you, Brother Randy," was all she could say. The woman, a member of a Nation of Islam mosque, a denomination not known for their friendliness towards Jews, then brought her entire family and her imam to our synagogue to be part of our services and fellowship. That act of progress was made possible mostly because of the uniqueness of our school situation. Last year, it was time to decide whether to take the next steps of this journey. Many families that can afford to, of all races, leave the district at the middle school transition as the ratio of lower middle wealth to upper middle wealth of attending families increases. So we would have options. Our daughter applied for and was accepted to a private school, one that was also racially diverse, but where the families are much more affluent across the board. Once again, though, we moved forward with the public schools of University City. Most of our daughter's closest friends, white and black, did the same. We figured, why preemptively leave the district when everything over 7 years had gone so well? We asked these questions of ourselves and more. How will we ever begin to stop the transmission of disadvantages to the next generation if we, in a position to do so, don't use some of our advantages to try and help stabilize and improve challenging situations? Is there still value in casting one's lot with one's own local community, taking in its many benefits, but also sticking with and being part of the solution in the areas that are less than perfect? Does having the best in all things as a youngster really translate into having the best quality existence later in life? I certainly don't know all the answers to those questions, those philosophical questions. I know that I love my children dearly and I would never knowingly put them at risk. I know that even as I write these words, if need be, we reserve the right to change our school situation, and we have the good fortune to have the resources to do so. I also know that every individual child is different, and there should be no cookie-cutter solutions when it comes to an education. But I do believe with all my heart that when it comes to the things you care about, there is a difference between talking talk and walking the walk. And September is a wonderful time to go on a long and challenging, but ultimately very rewarding hike or journey. The end. Oh, thank you for listening. I'm not sure what else to say. I did my caveat before, that we did later make the decision to send both of my kids to two different high schools that are not in the University City Public Schools. And again, that was not a decision, or not again, I probably didn't say this, that was not a decision at all based on any negative experience in the university schools, city schools. It was a proactive decision of them finding schools that really fit their personalities and their unique selves. Having said that, we're very supportive of the schools here, and I think both my kids attending those schools in elementary and middle school made a really a good impact on who they are, and I think they brought that sensibility to their high schools, and I think they will beyond. Both of my kids have written about the impact of attending their elementary school and their middle school, the positive impact it had on their character and their values. So I give all this humbly, and as I said in the beginning of the column, this is not about judgment. This was really something I really wanted to put out there that was very personal, and it remains so to me. And like a lot of really positive things in my life, that has stayed with me. Oh, I have some show and tell. Okay, so here we go. Besides the parade, I wanted to show you I have a lot of pictures, obviously, from St. Louis, from University City. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. Public schools. here, I'll move over here. But I think this is my favorite, and neither of them are my children. I was the whole time I was a dad up at Flynn Park School. I was a field, field day captain, volunteer. Loved it. And these two guys were on my one of my field day teams, and they didn't know each other. The young man to, I guess, my left, it's confusing on this, but to my left was older, upper classman in the elementary school, and the young man on the right was a kindergartner, I believe, or certainly first grade, younger, and the younger boy was very shy, and kind of I don't know, was having a little bit of a hard time, and the older boy took him under his wing, quite literally, as you can see in this picture, and just became a role model and almost like a junior counselor, and just made his day. And don't know if they stayed connected besides school after field day that year, but I took this picture, and I've always I thought about submitting it to the University City calendar or something like that, but I guess I'm submitting it now to you as it's being broadcast. So I just really, for me, it just sort of in many ways sums up the I don't know, just what all those years meant to me, and what I was able to observe and connect to and internalize. And so these two guys are probably high school at least. Probably in high school. And just wherever they are, I hope they're doing great and thriving. And so there you have it. So that's my column from the left wing back to school. I know what I'm going to do Tuesday, by the way, in case you're curious. This one's going to be I won't give the it's about licenses, and it talks about my ordination, but it connects that to, at the time, which was the fight for marriage equality, and specifically, myself as a rabbi who officiates weddings, and this was before the Supreme Court decision that made same-gender marriage legal throughout the land. Still unbelievable and wonderful that happened. This was before that, so 10 years ago, that didn't exist, and so it's about licenses and marriage licenses and ordination licenses, and the real ones and the ones we give ourselves. So hope you tune in Tuesday at noon. I'll see really quickly. Thanks, Karen, always with insightful comments. I don't need to read this out loud. I guess I'm not, Karen will tell me exactly what she means by that, but she goes on to say that it was wonderful, thoughtful, insightful, and loving. Thank you very much. And Karen, with her family, son started in the St. Louis Public Schools, didn't work, largely because of the uniqueness of their situation with their own child, like I said. And they still miss that community, and I think there's lots of stories like that. People do. You have to make every family's different, every dynamic is different, and it was really important for me in that column 10 years ago and now to know that we were doing what we wanted, what we thought was right, and both having our kids there and then sending them to outside of the district for high school. And lots of people I love and respect have made all kinds of choices when it came to school. And I respect them all, and I would never, ever, ever judge, because I think we're all trying to do the best we can. And I do really believe that. So thank you for that. And I think that was talking about those drive-by parades. That was awesome, and remarking on the sunny day with the flower moon. I saw that full moon last night. What a gorgeous night that was. I've been up really late during the quarantine, so I was out, post midnight with the moon. And thank you for whoever noticed I'm using an external microphone, which I am, thanks to Rabbi Daniel, who set me up. All right, 12:30, guys. I hope you have a good rest of the week, and a good weekend. Hope you stay well. Hope those you love stay well. As always, trying to put my arms around the world, the whole world, who needs all of our arms and all of our love. And I'm praying for those who are sick and those who are mourning, those who are suffering in all kinds of ways, and hoping that those of you that chose to watch this, it was, helpful and meaningful, and we're all trying to do things to connect to each other, but also to provide each other with something, because there's so many things we can't do outside of our homes. So that's that. There might be one more comment here. Nope, that's it. All right, my friends, those I know and those I don't know yet. Take care, and I'll be thinking about you. And remember, this coming Tuesday after the weekend at noon, number 8 episode of From the Left Wing. Here's my left wing.